Right. So we're talking about Auth for Gen AI. So Auth0 is an authentication and authorization platform. You can plug Auth0 to provide authentication authorization services into your apps using our APIs or SDKs. We've been around for 12 plus years, and we primarily target developers with this. So as we started seeing a rise of generative AI applications and developers trying to build agentic apps, we recognized that there were some very strong use cases here where agentic apps weren't securely trying to access APIs or data sources. So let's talk a little bit about that. We introduced Auth for Gen AI. It's available at auth0.com/AI. We're going to talk about why. We're going to do a demo, quick starts, talk about some resources. So just to kind of set up the stage here, what we have in a typical generative AI application or an agentic app, there's a user prompt aspect that a user asks questions from. There's some sort of an output that is generated. There's LLM inference that's used. There's some sort of agentic planning and orchestration that happens, typically provided by a bunch of these different frameworks today. And then many of these times, there are some tool calls that are made to third-party APIs or services. These can be over REST using newer upcoming protocols like MCP or Google's agent-to-agent. And this is so that an agentic app can securely access data sources to add more context to the responses that it provides. So this happens over tool calls. And then finally, there is also an aspect where agentic apps that are sometimes running in the background, they have to reach out to a user for some sort of an approval process. They might be processing some kind of a purchase or some kind of a transaction or something, in which case they reach out to a human so that the human can authenticate and authorize that transaction. And so we call this an approval process, and a human in the loop is required there. So this is a general setup of how we look at this space. Now, there are 4 authentication and authorization requirements when it comes to this scenario. First, the AI agent needs to know who I am. And this is a standard authentication. Someone needs to be able to there needs to be a way for users to log into their chat app or chatbot or other agentic app, so that the agent actually knows who's logged in and what they're trying to do. The second requirement is around the need to call APIs on the user's behalf. And so this is where, if an agentic app, let's say there's a sales agent, or let's simplify it, maybe a fitness coach agent that someone is trying to build. Now, that fitness coach agentic app is going to need to access perhaps a user's fitness apps or data from Google Fit or Strava or some other app. And so providing this agentic app an easier way, a secure way to connect to a user's services and APIs and get data from it is another one of these requirements. Then asynchronous interactions. This is where an agentic app that might be running in the background, and now it needs some kind of a human approval process, needs to reach out to a human and get that approval is another one of these requirements. And then finally, via RAG, retrieval augmented generation, a lot of agentic apps can access data, but there needs to be some sort of way for them to only access data that a user's permitted to access. So as an example, you might ingest a lot of internal company data into RAG, into a vector database, so that you can have an agent provide answers based on those files. But it might be the case that I, as an employee, shouldn't have access to certain files or certain types of data sources. And so there needs to be some sort of an authorization layer in the middle that prevents that RAG-based access to get all the files back and filter out the ones that I'm not authorized to use. So these are the 4 use cases. AI needs to know who I am, call APIs on the user's behalf, use asynchronous interactions for human in the loop authorization, and then also have authorization models so that it can only have access to data that I'm as a user I'm authorized to use. So with that, for these to tackle these 4 requirements, we built Auth for Gen AI. I'm going to give you an example. We're going to focus a little bit on calling APIs on users' behalf. So I'm going to give you an example, a demo of what that looks like. But before I do that, we have everything available at auth0.com/AI. Talks about the 4 use cases. There are docs that talk about all of the different use cases, quick starts on how to get going with authentication, calling APIs on users' behalf. There are a lot of how-tos, as an example, how to check, how to have an agent, how to provide an AI agent the ability to check a user's Google Calendar or list a user's GitHub repos, get Salesforce opportunities. And the other thing I want to call out here is the examples are both for JavaScript and Python frameworks. And we have a lot of different frameworks that we support. Vercel's AI SDK, LangChain, LangGraph, Google, Firebase, GenKit, LlamaIndex, and more. So there's a lot of how-tos there, sample apps, SDKs are listed here in guides. But let me get to an actual example. This is something that I just recently built. It's a playground. It's running on my local host here. And the first thing I do is I log in. So this is authentication. I've integrated Auth0 to log in into the app. And I'm just going to go continue with Google. And I end up in this chat interface where I can ask questions. It's just backed by OpenAI to provide answers. So this is a Vercel AI SDK-based chatbot app that I've created. Now on the left side, you can see that I have a lot of connected apps that are either connected. Some of them are connected, some of them are not. And what I've done here is I've linked using Auth0 these third-party apps to this agentic app that we're in right now, Playground Zero. So what I can do as an example is I can ask questions like, get 3 opportunities from Salesforce. And what it'll do is it'll leverage the token that Auth0 has managed on behalf of the user, on behalf of me. This app will get an access token from Auth0 to call Salesforce APIs and answer the questions that I'm asking it, right? So to kind of give you another example, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to connect HubSpot to this. So I click on HubSpot. By the way, the source code for this is on GitHub, and you can take a look at that, and we'll also take you through a little example as well. So I click on link account. And what it does is Auth0 redirects me to an application that I've set up in HubSpot's developer portal. So I select that. I say connect app. And it fails for some reason. Okay, let me do this. Sorry, 1 second. This is what happens when you run a live demo. Log out. Try to log back in. It connected, but let me see. List HubSpot contacts. Okay. So there's probably something messed up here, but the account linking worked. It didn't revert back. Maybe the callback URL is not correctly configured. So it connected. What it did was it redirected me to HubSpot so that I could log in using my HubSpot credentials. And then it should have redirected back to the app. But when it does, you can see that it linked HubSpot, my HubSpot account, to this Agentic app. And now I can ask it questions, list HubSpot deals as an example. And what this is doing is, again, I'll show you real quick. It's basically doing a tool call to HubSpot in this case, using the access tokens that as part of that account linking that we negotiate, Auth0 negotiated for that. So let me go into to kind of show you how this is set up. So the first thing we do is we have this is Auth0. This is a tenant in Auth0, and what we call is social connections. We configure social connections, and these connections enable Auth0 to negotiate tokens on behalf of the application developer. So in this case, I have a HubSpot connection set up. I have a Google, GitHub, and what a connection typically entails is linking up the authorization URL, which you can typically get from HubSpot's developer documentation, the token URL, what scopes we want the token to access, and then a client ID and a client secret. So these are the things that you need, and enabling something called Token Vault, which enables Auth0 to then negotiate a access token and a refresh token on behalf of the user and store it in Auth0 and do the token refreshes on behalf of the user. So once you have this these connections set up, I'm going to show you what the app here looks like. So this is the Playground app. And this is a Vercel AI SDK-based agent. This right here is the chat route, where I have some sort of a system prompt, the model that I'm using, and then the tools that I'm calling here. And the tool calls are where all the magic happens here. But before I do that, I'll show you what the tool looks like. There's also configuration of a .env file where I have to add all of my Auth0, the domain, the client ID, client secrets, etc., so that I can configure that. I also have to integrate Auth0 by configuring Auth0 client. And then one of these tools here is the HubSpot tools. And so what you can see here is a tool called List HubSpot Contacts. And it basically gets a list of contacts from HubSpot. And the key part here to notice is this right here, which is where to enable the tool to make a call to the HubSpot API. I'm getting a token, an access token from Auth0. And this SDK command here, auth0.get access token for connection. The connection type is HubSpot custom, basically enables this tool to call Auth0 to get an access token for HubSpot on behalf of the user so that it can call the client HubSpot APIs and get the contact details or the HubSpot deals or anything else that you that you have built in the tools. And these connections are basically what we configure in Auth0, so that the app can ask for credentials on behalf of the user. So in a nutshell, that's this is the setup and to be able to build agentic apps that allow securely calling third-party APIs on behalf of a user. So I'm going to pause here. We have all of the samples and examples are available on GitHub. A lot of the examples there are also other sample apps that we have under here, under the sample apps section. We also have framework-specific SDKs. So if you are if you have a standard Next.js or Fast API or Fastify, then you can use what I just described. But if you also want to natively integrate with LangChain, an agentic app that's built in LangChain or Llama Index or GenKit, then you can leverage our AI AI specific SDKs. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to pass it over to Christian, who's going to demonstrate how to configure something using our AI SDKs. Christian?
All right, awesome. Thank you. So as we're seeing, we have specialized Auth0 AI SDKs. As we mentioned before, we're trying to solve it for developers is the problems around building agentic apps for authenticating users, calling APIs on users' behalf, solving authorization for RAG, and async user confirmation, all the examples that Karen just showed us. So the AI SDK basically provides you with different tools to solve these problems. And in addition, we are also creating like a specific integrations with different frameworks that are out there. As you know, all the different frameworks for AI are have subtle differences into how to solve specific like tool definitions or calling RAG or stuff like that. So we are trying to unify that experience around Auth0 AI with this SDK. What we're going to showcase right now is basically the same example or similar example that Karen just showed us, but this time only around Google. And well, hang on a second. I forgot to mention something before mentioning that is that we not only have an AI JS SDK, but we're also building an AI Python one. So if you can build it, solving the same problems, having a very similar interface integration, and for Llama Index and LangChain, for example. So what I'm going to show you right now is, again, an Next.js application integrated using AI SDK. In this case, you can see how here we are passing down the tools, and we have a check users calendar tool using the Next.js Auth0 right now to get the access token for this connection, right? So this is, again, a very similar chatbot application where a tool needs to call a third-party API, in this case, Google, on behalf of a user, and we are trying to get the access token here. So I have prepared a few copy-paste snippets, and I'm going to walk you through. But essentially, what we're going to be using now is the Auth0 AI Vercel SDK. So we're going to start by installing this SDK. I'm going to go a little bit fast and maybe so that we have some time at the end for questions. So we are starting the AI SDK, and the first thing that we're going to do is initialize this SDK by, hang on a second, creating a file here, Auth0 AI, and pasting the initialization. In this case, you can see that we are importing Auth0 AI. We're also importing the Next.js Auth0 that we have just initialized. Why? Well, we are trying to build something to wrap our tool and ask for the specific scopes under a determined connection. So this is what Auth0 AI SDK does, right? So you can build a number of tools. You can have different tools calling Google with different scopes and have different ways to protect that tool or to authorize that tool or request tokens for that tool. And in this case, what we are doing here is we are providing the tool with a mechanism to obtain the refresh token of the currently logged in user. The reason we are doing this is so that you can use Next.js Auth0, you can use Express OpenID Connect, you can use any other framework that provides authentication with Auth0 ideally. In Python, for example, it's Auth0. And it doesn't matter the tool you're using, we're unifying the experience here. You just need to provide a way to retrieve the refresh token for Auth0 AI SDK to make this exchange using the token vault feature that we are released. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to continue. Now, something forgot to install one dependency for the tool, Google Calendar. We're using Google APIs dependency. And we're going to be updating this tool to use this new initialized Auth0 SDK. I'm going to copy paste the code, but highlight again the differences. You can see here that we were calling the Next.js Auth0 get access token for connection. Now, what we are doing is using the wrapper that we just initialized here, we are wrapping Vercel AI's tool within our helper. And now we're getting the access token directly from the Auth0 AI Vercel. So as I was saying, we are using the wrapper that we created with the help of the Auth0 AI SDK. And we are utilizing a specialized Auth0 Vercel SDK to get the access token for connection. Now, what happens here behind the scenes is, let's tell this now, every time or whenever the Agentic app, when the user makes a prompt, for example, list my events for tomorrow, the LLM is going to interpret that it needs to call this tool. What this wrapper is doing essentially is verifying the level of access that this user needs to call this tool and evaluating whether or not it needs to make a token exchange beforehand for the user. In this scenario, what is going to happen if the user doesn't yet have the access to Google authentication, to Google API, it's going to call for an interruption. And this is a new term that we are introducing here with the Auth0 SDK. It's a term that is actually common in the different AI frameworks that are out there, or it's getting common, is how do you introduce human-in-the-loop authorization or human-in-the-loop like actions. Well, most of frameworks are using this interruption kind of term, which basically is sending in the thread of execution of the prompt a stop and waiting for the user to make an action to then continue. In this case, for the Auth0 SDK, we are creating an interruption that requires the user to authorize this tool or authorize this tool with Google, right, to be executed and get the access token for this connection. Let's continue now with the next steps, because as we're saying here, this is going to return some sort of error. This error needs to be interpreted now by our application. So this is a React Next.js application. So we have created likely some components, like React components. We're going to be installing these components now. Some other dependencies required for this. And what we're going to do now is update our chat component to handle this interruption that now the LLM is going to be returning once this tool gets executed. So going to components, chat. Again, I'm going to copy paste here, and I'm going to go over the specifics. So you can see that we are importing from the AI Vercel SDK React the use interruptions, and we are now wrapping the use chat from Vercel AI around our use interruptions with a handler. We're using this handler to basically manage the error that we are returning, the error as interruption. And then we are passing this tool interrupt to our messages component, which I'm going to be updating to. So once we go to the messages component, this is sadly something that we need to do of how we built this. We need to spread this interrupt here. You can see down, we are passing this down, the interrupt down, and one more update, apologies for that, to the message component here. And there we go, here. So as I was saying, we are passing down this interrupt new error that we are creating. And now we are utilizing the ensure API access pop-up component that we install from the Auth0 AI components to handle this interrupt and display an authorization box for the user to continue. So with this done, I think I didn't forget anything. Oh, yes, I'm forgetting one more thing. We also need to update here our route to return that error from the tools, right? We are passing down the tool now, and we are executing with interruptions, right? This is a helper that we build around AI Vercel SDK to handle these interruptions. So with this done, I think I didn't forget to save files. We can run this, pm run dev, hopefully. And we should be able to access it. It's going to ask me to log in. As I log in with Google, apologies for the Spanish here, English, there we go. It's going to ask me to log in with an account. Then, yes, continue. There we go. What you see or didn't see in the prompts before for Google is that when I logged in, no scopes were asked for me. So nothing were asked for me to access Google Calendar or my Gmail account or anything like that. That's kind of also the deal with the Auth0 SDK. Only when the application or the agent in this case needs access to any of the resources that you are owner, only then it's going to be asking you for those permissions. So for example, I can ask now, am I free tomorrow at 4 p.m.? This is going to be sending the prompt. Now the tool, which is wrapped, is going to return an interruption. This is how the interruption looks like with the component that we just installed from the Auth0 components. And we can now trigger granting access to this. I hope that you see this here. I'm gonna first off zoom in and change these to English United States. There we go. So again, tell me if this is enough. I'm going to select my account for Google. This is because it's a developer application that we configure. Again, privacy policies. And after this, you can see that now I'm being asked for specific permissions to my Google account from this application. So after I accept this is an authorization from Auth0 because we are requesting offline access is kind of mandatory. And then give it a second, give it 2, there we go. The LLM now has access to my Auth0, to my Google account and can check my availability and reply. So if I ask again, am I free after, 5 p.m., now it should check again my level of access for this Google Calendar API. Knowing that now it has access, it can directly call the Google API and reply with this information for me. And that's pretty much it for the demo. What I'm going to show also before we hand the screen over is that on this repository for the Auth0 AI SDK and JavaScript and Python as well, we have a full list of examples for the different use cases, the problem that we're solving for developers in Auth0 AI applications. And you can go into any of these and you're going to find different integrations with the frameworks that we are supporting right now. That's it. With this, I'm handing it over to Karanas again.
Thanks, Christian. Right. So to kind of summarize this back, we're trying to solve for 4 different use cases. We're trying to authenticate users. In it, we're making it easier for developers that are building agentic apps to authenticate users into those apps, to have those agents call third-party APIs on the user's behalf securely without having to manage tokens. The other 2 use cases that we didn't demo but are documented and have SDKs and support and examples is when agents have to asynchronously call users to get some kind of authorization via push notification or email or something. And then finally, authorization for RAG use cases. So these are the 4 that we are trying to solve for. I encourage you all to, if you're building any kind of an agentic app as part of this hackathon, and it requires secure access to either RAG or to APIs, I encourage you to go to auth0.com/AI. Check out the docs. The quick starts describe how to solve for all of these use cases. There are some how-tos, as I mentioned earlier. And as Christian mentioned, the SDKs themselves are listed in here. So if you're building something specifically, let's say in LangChain, LangGraph, you can go to the LangChain SDK and check out the examples there. One last thing I want to call out is, so auth0.com/AI is the landing page. Then we also have some really good blog entries as an example, how to integrate MCP, how to provide authentication for MCP servers. If you're deploying a remote MCP server on on Cloudflare as an example. How do you secure tool calls that MCP server is trying to make? So there's some really good blog posts on that. And then also finally, we have a Discord. If you run into any kind of issues, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.